I would love to hear, if we had each person was given a minute just to share one or two barriers to entry and one or two possible solutions, if we can go around the room that way.
Sure. This was just something I thought about recently. I think with bluegrass and old time, it's really interesting because there's a real emphasis on authenticity and like the tradition, but I feel like there is a very fine line between being authentic and gatekeeping. And so there has been, a very narrow view of what bluegrass music is. Now, I mean, looking at that indie bluegrass playlist was very interesting for all of us, but I think we have to, instead of like shun that or being confused, it's like use that as a learning tool. Because this is how we're going to reach younger people. And another thought that I had, I was actually talking with Marcia about this last night. I was talking about Sirius Bluegrass Junction. It's a radio station that pretty much plays like one type of bluegrass music, and it's not particularly my favorite genre. And I was saying, like, I would love to meet with Kyle, and like, even if he would play old time music or some other things, and like, because was the tastemaker for bluegrass music, but here's a thought, even though we're all bummed about that news, maybe, it seems weird, especially because Billy Strings is so huge, but maybe what this will mean, like, maybe a few years down the line, they do get a new bluegrass show, and it's a new host with this expanded thinking that it's not just going to be something about Little Monroe's mandolin.
Yeah.
I think the barriers of attracting younger audiences are just like not a huge, wide array of like educational programs having 2 degrees in music education. It's like just not really in their typical jokes are, and a nationwide thing. So, and I think the solution for that is creating an educational program and having a mission statement surrounded around that of like why we would do it, and figuring out a way to encapsulate in that, making the focal point that bluegrass music is for all humans, just like period. That's my thoughts about attracting the audiences.
I think like the biggest barrier I see with it, maybe is stagnation within the genre. And like one example of that is like the award show. Like who is receiving these awards? Well, maybe look at who's voting, and it's like, well, who wants to, I don't know, who wants to be younger? And then you have like these younger audiences that are just seeing the same people get awards or whatever, so why would they want to even try to climb the ladder? Because it seems to have people, so you kind of have to almost stop if you really look at like, who's getting these awards. I guess the solution, I don't know, I think like outreach or some campaign initiative around vibrancy, community, and innovation, and inclusivity could be a good thing, but then there's also pushback from that. I don't know. I don't know the answer, but I like that.
I think the whole Billy Strings topic is really interesting because I think like a lot of people kind of use that as like a golden staple for like this is what bluegrass could be, but I think it's like we also have to like kind of realize the sad realization that that's like, even though Billy's like huge on top of the world, that's the biggest we've ever gotten, like in bluegrass ever, like in a wide array of audiences. I think just realizing that like that is a very rare case of that happening in the broad spectrum of things. I'm not saying it couldn't happen again because Molly's Huddle obviously is another artist doing very similar things, but I think like kind of like approaching that in a way of like, okay, how can we take this audience and slowly start branching from it to get like more of that audience interested in bluegrass
trying to, like what Hasee brought up about the award show, which is it's like very stark, honestly, if you do look at like the people that win over and over and all this stuff, but like having younger folks trying to get into leadership and having leadership embrace that representation so that decisions can be made, with everyone in mind from the beginning instead of retroactively.
One of the greatest barriers was a small genre that has like a lot of barriers to entry. Regionally, education-wise, it's not accessible to everyone. I also think that it is becoming more inclusive as far as like how it's growing away from what is considered authentic musicians, like authentic bluegrass. But and like having that open up is gonna draw the younger crowd too, because none of the kids who are going to love bluegrass in 40 years are gonna have the same experiences or write music about the same things that people did 50, 60 years ago. Like that authentic bluegrass is. And I don't love that word. I was just listening to something about like authentic food, for instance. Like when you're doing a creative thing, how is it authentic? And if that's just like cuts people off, like for instance tacos. Like there's authentic New Mexican food, like tacos. There are like what is the one that's taken? The street tacos. No, they're like in Mexico, like originally like immigrants brought over like the shawarma kind of spinners, and that became a style of. Do you guys know what taco is? Yeah. But like just there's authentic things to like a smaller group or individual over time or space, but making that into like the whole idea of what a thing could be can be detrimental, I just wrote like education. I think the next generation can detect a lot of historical BS more, so like expanding the history to be more inclusive of the actual history of the genre. Instead of allowing the genre to be more inclusive. Camps, educational grants. That's what I got.
My two main barriers to entry are just exposure and then feeling like an outsider. I think because there are so many families and so many generations of people in the bluegrass community and musicians. If you're not from a family that grew up in bluegrass, you may feel like an outsider as you are exposed to music. And that could be for musicians wanting to get into it and also for fans too. And I think that the way we're attracted, we've been talking about this a lot, I like brought it up a bunch of times, but just continuing to be welcoming and staying content. I feel like that is being talked about so much more now, but that was always the case.
Same, the barriers are exposure and like that gatekeeping effect. And I think like the problem of arts education is a big factor in like kids don't necessarily get music education these days. And it is like even when they do, it's very much like racially stratified and like economically stratified. So like there are programs that I have like learned about or I applied to teach at one of them, didn't get a job, but like they'll take orchestral music into schools and like specifically low income schools. And I think partnering with something like that to not just like do classical music but also take roots music into schools is something that could be really effective at like broadening horizons for a lot of people who really like just never would be exposed to old hammer bluegrass in the first place. And then once they are exposed to it, they need to feel welcome. They need to feel like there is a place for them here. And I do think like exploring the history and sort of looking at the way that it isn't this
monolith that it seems like sometimes, is a really good way to like, the history's already there. Like the contributions from people of color and queer people and women are all already there. It's just what you choose to like put your attention on. And I did a little sneaky Google to support this idea. Gen Z is the most racially diverse generation ever. And they are like, in studies, proven to be motivated by like justice and inclusion. And so it's, again, like ethics line up with motivations economically, where the audience is motivated by this. There are people who will be drawn to a community and music that seems inclusive and seems more like social justice warrior minded. So if you want young people, that is a good way to get them.
I put education and exposure.
Yeah.
So you can have, did everybody get a recorder? When you're in elementary school. So then in the 5th, 6th grade, you get to choose, are you going to be in a band? Are you going to play clarinet or flute or drums, whatever? Those options in my community weren't given to my children. It was basically you have these options and that's it. So again, taking string instruments into the education system, and then also with exposure, I don't see a lot of bluegrass stations. I know there's podcasts and all of that, but in my community here in Tennessee, we're not saturated. You can have 200 country pop radio stations, so there's room for more broadcasting. Again, that goes into the exposure part. And then the classes, the camps at festivals, get them while they're young, make it fun and creative. And then also volunteer. I think we talked about that earlier about volunteering at the festivals, showing how much fun it is. And I have the dance lane where that's fun. Dance is to be joyful. So when you get them young and have some fun. Again, for me, it's the education and exposure to them when they're young.
Yeah, I wrote down a few points. Sammy, when she did her 2 minutes, she said something that really struck a chord with me, that bluegrass is really intergenerational. And it really is. You go to any festival, you've got the kids and the parents and the grandparents all jamming together. That's a hell of a strength to work from. Bluegrass music also is a music that needs to be listened to. I don't know about you guys, but I can't just have it on in the background. I just have to stop and listen to what's happening. Which makes it all different for the young generation. Very brief anecdote. I was recently approached by a French TV station who wanted to make a 15-minute documentary about bluegrass music. I was talking to a woman on the phone. I never met her, but she had a North African name. She was fascinated, and she really got into it. Loved the whole culture and the history of the social and economic things. And then one day she said, well, when does the history really start in 1930? So again, to the point, let's tell the real story. And kind of my final point is, young people don't do things the way I did, you know. In my generation, you had to have sort of your name as a super guy doing this to have credibility, whereas now kids, anybody has credibility if they like it. So they're a whole different code. So I'm really not the kind of guy who should be saying I should be in trap. And I was thinking that maybe IBMA could launch a task force to do this. And what better place to start than here? I mean, look at you guys. You're the guys who should be telling us how to trap. I'm not going to tell you how to trap it. I can't trap mine. Yeah, they do. They volunteer, but that's 1 week a year. And there's more and more. Do we really have to do it this year? So that was my final point. The potential in this group here to actually do something beyond this afternoon. So I'm referring to Campbell.
So a few maybe words or slants on some similar ideas is, I wrote down the word relevance or relevant, like how to make this music relevant to more people. I think it should be. Bluegrass is cool, so is a lot of music, right? Like, what does this do for people? And then I was expanding on that, thinking about how professional involvement is the only important path, right? That like this music serves many functions, and I think to me some of the most important ones are community building, connection, self-expression, creativity, and joy. And I think we can kind of ground ourselves in what music can do for young people. I find that motivating. It sort of helps me frame what it can look like, and the types of people that can support it, and the types of people that can participate.
Really great community, especially now.
Yeah, totally. And self-expression. Yeah.
All right, you got to start when they're young, like real young. We're not talking 20-somethings or teens. You got to get them before that. And to do that, you've got to get young families involved. And many times with festivals and what young families can't afford to do that. So you have to make, you have to put your money where your mouth is here. You have to make it more viable for these young families, more affordable for these young families to use that as their vacation time to, come to your events and your festivals. You have to have programs. If you're an organization, set up programs for your youth. Mentoring, workshops. We loan instruments. We donate instruments. We loan them out. So your 9-year-old wants to play banjo this week, and you don't have to buy him a banjo because next week he wants to play fiddle. You can. So that goes back to just making it accessible to them. Make it affordable, accessible. Remember, young kids have younger parents. And it's a tougher time. So a lot of times we talk about why do we only have old people on our board. It's because young people in their 30s and 40s have a lot more life to live, a lot more involved with families, jobs, and everything else, and don't have the time. So what was those folks, you need to invest in. And what I found out is if you make these investments and you can get some families in, those will draw more families in. And I've watched, like Sammy said, there's a vibrant young people scene that started when they were, I met some people here in their area and stuff, but you have to invest in it. You have to put the time, put the effort, and put the finances behind it. I don't know. That's about it.
That's the thing I heard say, Dave, speaking back on that, was I'd written down, where's the money? Where's the power? These are all great things. How do we, where is most of the money in this industry concentrated? It's not in this. Right?
It's the old white track guys and stuff, but you got to get them on your side, too. Come on, do something with it.
A lot of us got into it through family, so the idea of making it accessible.
Well, that's the whole thing. To make it, because a lot of times, young family with 2 or 3 kids, you talk about festival and, taking time off work and the price of the festival and, everything else, it gets pretty tough. And there's a whole bunch of people, young families, that are right now at this time of year or last month looking for summer camps, activities, and things for that. And so you have all these youth programs for them, invite them, and make it welcoming for them. So welcoming for young families and stuff. It's easier for them. And a lot of times that's, I hate to go back. A lot of times that's financially making it easier for them.
Yeah. I think that as a young person in a full-time band, it's my responsibility to try to respect the old people in the scene so much, first and foremost, but also not just cater my music to them. I want to cater my music to younger people, and maybe that sometimes means referencing some sort of inside joke that only young people would get, or maybe an older person be like, wait, what? Or that's not, and that's, again, I don't want to alienate older people, but I think that I've seen examples of that in the old-time scene that have kind of shaken things up, and it also started conversations, not just you wouldn't understand older person, but started interaction between younger people and older people. And I remember, when I was a kid in Seattle, there was this band, Foghorn String Band in Portland, that was young, cool, hip, party people. And they were kind of just just had a really fun time hanging out together and playing music, and they modeled that. And it was like so much about the music, but it was also about hanging and the community. And I think it's my responsibility to model that for young people and just have fun and bring people into that. I also think, just getting kids at a young age. I was talking also a little earlier with Giselle about this program in Seattle that's called Jazz Ed, which is a jazz-oriented program. It's a nonprofit that helps provide instruments and free lessons, and it's all like sliding scale cost of involvement for mostly like marginalized and students of color and lower economic status. Because in a lot of the jazz programs in high school, whereas that was a really black musical scene in Seattle for the jazz scene, as people get older in the departments, it's like a very white. They're really good jazz bands that go to whatever, essentially Ellington, or all end up being kind of white or privileged students because they have access to lessons and all that stuff. So I was involved slightly with helping with this Girls Ellington project, which was just an all-female jazz band. And it was cool because the woman in charge was like, if women don't start improvising before like middle school age, they might just never feel the confidence to do that. And there's an element of just in these educational spaces, not making kids feel uncomfortable, but throwing them slightly into a deep end where you're like, yeah, just try something, take a risk, we're going to support you, it's kind of scary, but like go do that. That can happen, that I think I was so grateful to have that when I was younger going to films.
One of the barriers I was kind of thinking of, sort of similar to what Dave was saying, was just financial barriers, especially for, coming from my perspective, it was sort of like touring bands right now. It's a pretty tough landscape out there. And just like sometimes having more practical solutions is something that I appreciate from certain organizations. So like things like having solutions from IBMA, such as hotel, some sort of hotel sponsorship or something like that, where you can say, if you're a member of IBMA and you're a young touring band, this chain of hotels can help you out. Or like if you want to stay healthy on the road, we partner with this gym or something like that, or things like that, that were just kind of simple, practical solutions to help young bands kind of keep growing this.
So I made a note, like most of you, about exposure and certainly economic barriers, but I want to go back to something Jeff said, and this needs to resonate with you. Each of you in here are entrepreneurs in your own ways. And entrepreneurs recognize opportunity. And each of us in this room have an opportunity to expose someone to this music that has not been exposed before. Each one of us, it can be one-on-one. How many of you have invited a friend to go to a concert with you, and now they're a fan of bluegrass? I worked with the Hall of Fame, the Bluegrass Music Hall of Fame. I still work with the Hall of Fame. We started a Saturday strings lesson. It's $95 for about 10 lessons, and it culminates. They open our rock festival on Saturday on the main stage. People from 8 years old to 80. We wrote a grant to get the funding because it does require financial resources. But each of us live in communities where there are arts organizations, and I think it's incumbent on us as entrepreneurs to work within our communities. Go to our arts council and say, I'll bring a bluegrass band here. I'll assemble a bluegrass band. If you get a sponsor to do that, and give tickets to an elementary school or to a local high school. So, in my mind, it's incumbent on those of us in leadership positions within bluegrass to work within our own communities and our own networks. Recognize opportunities to expose new audiences to our music.
not a shredder, and it can be intimidating to go to festivals or jams when you're just like, oh my gosh, Trey is about to blow my mind. But I think something that was really important to me, and I think could be something to enhance the access to younger people is making sure there's participation in other ways, like folk song competitions, songwriting competitions, even like cooking and other forms of art and expression at these events and festivals, and just making sure it's not always all about the jam and the picking, and that there's other ways for people that doesn't speak to them, or that's not their area of expertise, that they can still participate.
Black pot does that really well.
Sorry, what?
Black pot does that.
Oh, yes, exactly. Yes, that's a great example.
I guess I kind of looked at this from an Australian standpoint, where bluegrass is very, very small, and we fall into the country music industry, and it is growing over there. So some of my ideas are, and when I say it's growing in Australia, our audience is growing with just young people. We're not bringing in the grey-haired nomads, as we call them in Australia. We're bringing in young people. So there's this stigma that it's not cool, that, you know, bluegrass isn't cool, that's an old people's music. And if I had $1 for every time someone says to me, oh, I really hate bluegrass, but I love what you do, I would have made a really good living. But one thing that we are doing in Australia that I would like to think would work here, maybe it wouldn't, I don't know what the school system is like here, but bluegrass bands in Australia, what we're doing is we're playing a show in Asheville, North Carolina tonight. Well, at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, we are going to the local elementary school or middle school, and we're putting on a free concert for the entire school in the gymnasium, playing 30 minutes of fantastic bluegrass music, and then offering free tickets for the kids and discount tickets for the parents to come to our shows that night, which is doing two things. One, it's getting bottoms on seats to our shows, and two, it's showing our music to people that they've got in their head, I need to listen to Ariana Grande because that's cool. Well, bluegrass is cool too. And so we're just literally putting ourselves in front of these young people and showing them that there's this music that they may not know. You know, there's nothing cooler than seeing a fiddle player or a banjo player take the fastest solo that you've ever seen in your life. For a teenager to just go, how did they do that? And then giving them that opportunity to come to your show tonight for free. Like, you know, you've got to be willing to, as an artist, to put that investment into, but it's working in Australia.
Well, I think that's a good point to at least like seek out opportunity to play for kids, because I don't know about you guys, most of the gigs I play are coming on and over. So like they don't allow kids. So it's like I'm just now recognizing that like that's not an option unless you hook up the school gig, which can be really hard and like logistical.
I don't know how schools work over here. I know in Australia, as a band, if you call up the local school and say, hey, we want to come to your school and play a free concert for all of your kids, the school's going to go, yes. I don't know if that happens over here, but over there, they love it. They think it's great. The teachers will grab any opportunity to not have to be in the classroom.
I can vouch that they do, because Jam Pack, for instance, and even like the offshoot bands, Fair Black Rose, that played at IBMA, World of Bluegrass for 2 years. Part of their roster, they won't only play at the festival, they'll usually go to a local elementary school and go play for the kids. And it was very well received, and a lot of the kids, one of the best experiences is the kids will come up, that is so cool, and then you hear them talking about, I want to learn how to play that, and that's how you
and they go home and they tell their parents,
yes.
And they nag their parents, and then they nag their parents, and then they nag their parents, until they get what they want. Don't underestimate the power of an 8-year-old. I'm telling you, I've got one. Yeah, I'm done. That was my only. Yeah, it's working over there. Slowly, it's a slow movement, but it's working, so.
All right, so I suppose I'll take the baton there.
Handing over.
So I suppose I'm going to echo the two things that have been repeated over here as far as barriers, which is background or exposure, and socioeconomic status, right? Those are the two barriers. So then I'm going to move quickly from that to what would be the solutions, because the solutions mean we got to bring down those barriers. And as far as background or exposure, we need to invest in education. The IBMA started the Arnold Schultz Foundation, for instance, and I was involved in one of the programs called Band Jam, which was to take, they got funding to actually go to, get a couple of black kids and teach them bluegrass music, okay? And part of this, why I'm saying that is you can use a model like that. You have to put money behind things, or partner with community centers, community arts organizations, and provide programs for young kids, right? Emphasize history, because marginalization has become generational. I'm saying this because kids have to see themselves in the music. They have to feel that they belong. In order for them to belong, they have to know that they are also a part of that music. For instance, we talk about Bill Monroe all the time. People forget Bill Monroe was mentored by Arnold Schultz, who was black. We talk about Hank Williams. Well, Hank Williams worked with T. Todd Payne, who was black. So the generational aspect of things, if you know your history of bluegrass, especially around the 40s when communities of color got marginalized out of ownership of this music, by the record labels, they don't see themselves in it. It's become generational where they see themselves in other music, but not in bluegrass, because they don't feel they're a part of it. And it's important that we emphasize that history in our communities, in our organizations, put the money behind it, so that they learn their history and know that, hey, this I belong. So that's with the background exposure side of things. When it comes to the socioeconomic side of things, it's accessibility. And then you have to also make sure you need to do what matters to young folk. What matters to them? It's that sense of belonging, right? Accomplishment, having a sense of accomplishment or coolness factor. They want to see themselves in the music. And so you need to give them a creative space. What has worked with Jam-Pack is as a grassroots organization, the kids get to be involved in making music. And so they get to express their own selves creatively in that. The rise of things like TikTok and social media, why it's so explosive is because kids have a platform for which they can express their own creativeness, their own creativity. Right? So if they can see themselves in that, and to Kristy Cox's point, like what Jam-Pack will do, if kids see other kids doing it, then they go, oh, that's cool. That's how TikTok and social media works. They need to see themselves playing this music and having fun doing it. And it's done in that community setting where they'll go out, they'll play music, they do camping, they can form bonds, they'll do camping, they do speaking, they do jam sessions and things like that. So that's my 2 bits too, with as far as just getting young people engaged in what I've experienced working with young people and seeing them succeed in this and inspiring in them that sense of accomplishment, give them responsibilities, and they'll respond.
I wanted to just start by dovetailing on what Kristy said. It's just so great to hear that model is working in Australia, because that's the focus of the education panel that we're going to be doing later, which is to revamp a program that Special Consensus put together, which is exactly that. They would, supplement their tour and encourage people to attend their shows and encourage people to get involved in bluegrass music by visiting schools on Wednesday through Friday and then playing on the weekend. That was their model for 20, 30 plus years. And they created an implementation manual instructing other bluegrass bands who wanted to do similar things to follow that model. And so what we're working on in that session is to revamp that, make sure it's up to date, and give opportunities for bands to do the same kind of work, give them the sorts of things that they need to make that happen more often. Anyway, what I put as a barrier to entry is the sort of this failure of education systems to, just really put string band music in front of people. I think that if we look at the success that jazz music has had in primary and secondary education, I mean, there are places in this country where your music elective is jazz band, and that's like beautiful. It's our music, being taught in the schools. And even concert band music is sort of more reflective of American music. They're more inclusive of the kinds of music that we have ownership of as Americans. What we don't see is in the string programs. I mean, in where I was from, when I brought a banjo or a mandolin to school, not just the kids, but the teachers have never seen it in their life. I mean, they're thinking a mandolin is a banjo. I mean, it's just like all over the place. And so I just think that that's a kind of tremendous just failure in education systems of exposure and things like that. And so that's the main thing I had as a barrier. And a possible solution to that would be the solution that it was for me, which is I came into this music through teacher training programs, through workshops, through all sorts of opportunities for professional development. And I think that that's the easiest and quickest way to get teachers who are currently working in the schools involved. They have all this built-in time every year to attend professional development. They get grants and money from the district to do these things. And so putting that information in front of teachers, I think, is a really quick and easy way to get teachers hip to what we're doing.
Okay. We have no bluegrass playing families at all in Rotterdam. So, but we do want to attract a younger audience, and we are always looking at that goal. And we do 5 things to achieve that. If we look at the people who visit our festival, that starts with 0 until 16, and then it starts again with 21 until 100. So we don't get 16 until 18. There's a bit of a gap there. But what we try to do to get these younger audience and in the festival and hopefully into bluegrass is we do firstly an education project in the schools around the festival. So we hire a teacher that goes to the schools and he gives musical lessons for 3 months. And the kids, they get free lessons and a musical instrument, and then they form a band and they can open the festival. So we not only give them musical lessons, but we also let them be a part of the festival, is to let them get up on stage and perform. And it's also an opportunistic reason for it. So in 10 years we have our own bluegrass bands from Rotterdam.
That's great. In the public schools?
In the public elementary schools.
Elementary schools.
So that's what we do, and we also have talent shows. So young bands, just a little bit older, they can join the talent shows, and they're starting out, and most of the Dutch bluegrass bands have very, very little place where they can perform because it's just not such a well-known musical. Bluegrass is not very well known. So we do that, and we got a big response on that. We did it last year for the first time, and immediately we got 7 bluegrass bands in their ages around 18. So that's how we try to support young musicians. And we also do it by programming young and hip bands, that attract that audience. But also, I noticed that there's a lot of kids, that are into punk and gothic, but they also like things like psychobilly. And I try to book one of those bands, and that so they come to our festival and they see the psychobilly bands, but they also see bluegrass. So they get the best of both worlds. Apart from that, it's just marketing on social media. We just do paid campaigns on age. And also one very important thing we do is, during the festivals, is doing workshops. And the important thing with these workshops is that it's quality workshops. So the children really, not just an air cushion, but that you really do something fun with them. For instance, we have a guy who does it. It's called Papa Leba, and he has his own workshop. And he teaches children to start a blues band. So that works really well. And the advantage is that if you get the children doing the workshops, the parents can sit back and drink beer. So that's what we do to attract younger audience.
Love it.
All right, well, I'm not gonna, I think all of the barriers, or not, maybe not all, but the barriers I was gonna highlight have already been addressed. So I'm gonna give y'all some anecdotes and maybe a couple of my solutions to this problem. One is that IBMA has funding programs for youth outreach and stuff like that. So if you're on tour, go, convince the community, especially if you're, I get like what Amy was saying where you don't have time on the road, but if you ever do have time on the road, convincing a school to go get $500 to bring you into the school to play and play an assembly like Kristy's talking about would be amazing. Anecdotally, at the Floyd Country Store, we've created a Share the Music program, which is a scholarship fund. And so no one gets turned away. We also have that for food, a pay it forward, so people can buy meal tickets, and anyone who comes up and asks for food, who has, single mom, 4 kids, we feed them. And so there's always money there, and people pay into this, and whenever they buy a ticket, they have the opportunity to put money into that fund. And you'd be surprised how many people just be like, oh, okay, $50, cool. There you go. And it stockpiles for us so that we can just give it. So the case in point is like, I had 4 inlanders recently, and it was on a Tuesday, and I did not sell very many tickets. It was like 20 people coming. I invited all of my families to come, and they all came. And it took it from 20 people to 60 people, and 60 people heard them instead of 20. They didn't have to buy tickets, so they bought CDs. They bought food at the store. They basically supported it in a different way. So we still ended up being better than we would have been if we had just been like, oh shit, 20 tickets. So you got to think outside the box. And I think probably as you're on tour, you could have your own little funding mechanism for your own outreach on your website where people could pay into a thing where you're just going to invite people. If you've got a show that's not doing well, you could invite 20 families or 10 families to come, and I think you'll end up gaining new fans. And and the other thing at the store that I do is I have this whole group of kids from like 2 years old to 15 years old, 16. And they're there every Friday night. They dance. The parents have sent me videos of them play acting Floyd Country Store scenarios in their home. They're like making the dance floor, and they've got their whole thing. So they're in it. They are totally in it. And so I book them every Friday night to play a little mini set in between the bands. And what that does for them, well, first of all, and we also have a kids dance where the kids dance only. And at the end of that dance, the whole room throws their pocket change out onto the floor. And we have some kids who've set up a whole industry of picking up they've got a business going of, the pocket change business. So they get the kids dance called up so that they can make some money, go buy some ice cream or whatever. But these are things that we've seen really starting to pay off because those families are coming. The families are buying food. The families are there in multiple sets of families. The other thing I'll say is that K through 12 is I don't have any confidence that K through 12 education is going to figure out how to teach music in America anytime soon. And it's programs like Handmade Music School and Junior Appalachian Musicians and the programs that y'all were talking about that are the ones in the communities that go partner with schools to make it happen. So us all figuring out how to help IBMA fund Junior Appalachian Musicians or Jam Pack or some of the others that we've mentioned is something that we have to do. And you know, field trips and going into nursing homes and doing outreach anytime you can, I think is incredibly powerful as far as feel good, building audiences, and sort of dealing with some of the lack of inclusion, which we've done also on like Larry and Joe. Joe Troop has a fantastic duo with Larry Bellerin, where we invited the Latino community out. They weren't going to pay to come see that show, so we invited them in. And there's been multiple things like that where we're just like being selfless about the finance to build community and build our audience. And I think those are some solutions and tools that I think are low-hanging fruit that maybe, you know, just aren't being thought about.
That was great.
When I was thinking about this, I went from the position of what are some things I think might be issues or things for us to consider, and I think at the outset I would say it's especially important for people of my generation to approach this with humility and understanding of, I don't necessarily know everything, and also I think as Christopher brought up, the way that younger people might take in this music or be exposed to it might be completely different than what I experienced, which was being taken to a festival, or being taken to a concert hall and seeing a band play. If that's not the way people are used to getting entertainment these days, or getting media, then it's incumbent on us to understand more about how that happens and speak in that language. I mean, think of it as learning a different language. That's the language we need to speak, and those are just two of the things I saw. And also, so that's sort of under the category of presentation, how the music is presented, and being very much aware of what is the perception. If the music is perceived, we talked about tradition being a wonderful thing, and tradition could also be perceived as being old or stale or crusty or moldy. And if that's the perception, understanding it and working with that. So starting from a place of trying to understand how much we don't know.
Well, many things that I wrote down and thought about have already been touched on. I think one of the points from earlier today about strategic inflection points, I think we're seeking those. If we're looking for places where there's an opportunity to either expand something that's working on a small scale or create something new that could work on a variable scale depending on what the nature of it is. For example, you know, it'd be lovely to think that curriculum development that could be given to an interested school district could be developed that would allow a music teacher to actually work something into their music program. But you have to have trained teachers to do that. And so you've got that trained teacher idea there that, you know, you could sort of look at this as pieces of a big puzzle. You've got to get trained teachers, you've got to get a receptive school district, you might need receptive community organizations that can help provide some of the teachers and instruments, and you know, maybe nonprofits that can help provide some of the actual tangible part of the program. Partnerships with arts organizations. We do that in Alaska. We have a big arts organization, and they bring people to town. We get them into the schools to do shows, but then there's no follow-up. So that's a piece that could have another, you know, a more sustainable element to it. There are things like the Boys and Girls Club after-school programs. Those are fantastic places to put something like music. I think Bonnie Raitt gave, I don't know, 100,000 Fender guitars, little guitars to Boys and Girls Club so that they could have a rudimentary music program. Dolly Parton was just given $100 million by Jeff Bezos. It's time to talk to Dolly Parton about some of this stuff. Because she has a bluegrass background. I mean, she's one of the best philanthropists in this country when it comes to some of these things about education. But you know, many of the things that were touched on were really good about building on existing things, music camps and stages. There's partnerships that maybe should be strengthened, like the Navy and Army bluegrass bands. Get them into more schools and into more communities. That's what they're there for. They are the PR arm of our military services, and those guys, that's how we got Frank Sullivan. They recruited him when they came to Alaska, saw what a good player he was, and he spent 4 years playing bluegrass, with our tax dollars, and he's a fabulous musician now.
And the secret is they will play for no cost.
That's right. They'll come for free. You don't have to pay.
You don't have to pay.
We didn't have to pay to ship them up there, and they're very inspiring. And certain audiences, not all audiences, but some audiences would respond to that. So I think there's a way to look at these inflection points where we could take some pieces, some of these great ideas, and maybe find a particularly receptive community or some place to try to put some of these things together in a demonstrable way, with some grant or other philanthropic funding to see how far this kind of thing could really get embedded in a community. So those are some ideas.
Thank you. And Dawson, thank you for facilitating this portion of the show. And you did a wonderful job. This is a great forum. I heard a lot of great ideas. So first of all, give everybody a hand. And we have 10 more minutes. And I heard so many good ideas. I don't want to let this just sit because I think there was some really good thinking here. So for the next 10 minutes, I want to lead a little bit of a discussion on what each of you will be doing as a result of hearing these ideas or maybe occurring these ideas. So with the discussion that Austin facilitated was more descriptive, what are the problems, and so forth. But I'd like to go towards action. What are you going to do different when you get home? What are you going to do when you get home that's going to be different as a result of this discussion? Take the initiative and let's change the world here, right? Alex,
just hearing people's working artists, in music, I run a concert series, I'm bringing my next artist to bring to a school, and there's, and I was just thinking I should talk to Phil and Adam about having kids square dance at the next Charm City Bluegrass Festival, or having, last year, I had kids play at the Oklahoma Honky Tonk that I think of, so just oh my gosh, that's Dave, who's my 9-year-old friend who plays fiddle and can play, all those kinds of things.
So we'll hold you to that, Alex. I'm your buddy down there in Maryland.
Yeah.
I'll hold you accountable.
I'll do it.
Who else has got some things that they will do? Oh, excellent. Better.
I was just going to mention a couple of things in Colorado that I've seen. One is Candy. Do you guys know about Candy? It's a nonprofit in Fort Collins that has a lot of different things, like the donation things, but one of the things is called a Tunes program. They partner with bands, they partner with schools, and basically while the band is on tour, they find a community, they call the school district, they find a school in need, they call that teacher, and they ask the teacher, if you had this much money, what would you spend it on? We're going to buy it from you. And then they pay the band and give tour support to go into the school and do a demonstration for the kids. Talk about what our music is, how we write it, all that kind of stuff, which is really, it's a great way to get not only instruments and supplies into the classroom that a teacher needs, but also a different type of music that people haven't heard. And then there are a couple of elementary school programs in Fort Collins as well that the elementary school has allowed through grants to do bluegrass programs
some research and go out and scare up some dollars. That's awesome. You know, you help.
I will.
Marcia.
Contacting my local county elementary school for a music and dance program workshop, something that's fun, or a springtime concert. We have some local musicians and singer-songwriters, so that would be a community development there for the youth education. And then also meeting with Brenda and partnershiping with a youth music program. I know they have great networking systems to get donations for instruments, but to initiate something for the youth to come and be a part of making music.
What is that? I mean, they're just little kids.
Right.
They don't want to go. Wonderful. Amy.
Well, my bandmate put this on our band page, but I could do this on my own. And you guys maybe know about this. If you've seen emails from Brad Wagner, there's currently an initiative right now for IBMA Catch the Bluegrass Wave. You've probably seen emails from him about it. And I think Stillhouse Jones just did it. It's to encourage folks to join the IBMA. So, you know, post about it on social media, and there was one other one that I forgot.
So you're going to?
I could do it on my own. I had another thought. I forgot it though. About my person.
But you're going to start posting.
Well, yeah, my band's done it, so maybe like it was.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wonderful. I'm looking for personal actions that happen as a result of this conversation.
Yeah, I forgot what my second one was.
That's great. Well, but you remember, figure that out.
Yeah.
Kristy.
I'm going to put my money where my mouth is, and I'm going to start putting some concerts on in elementary schools. I know that we're talking about, a lot of us have been talking about getting kids to play music, but there are going to be a bunch of kids that aren't going to play. They just want to listen to music. And we need to capture them as well. Because without people that listen to music, we don't have an audience.
Probably 10 to 1,
so,
right? I mean,
so I want to, I'm sorry, Ellie, we're going to be playing some schools this year. It's fine, right? Like, I just want to go out and...
I think any of us that tour can, any of us that tour can absolutely do better about that. I mean, how many times are we on the road and we're off on a Tuesday or a Monday? So that's always something that I'm gonna like suggest to my band.
That's awesome.
Clock in an hour earlier before sound check and clock in at school for half an hour.
Exactly. How many of you guys know the Henhouse Prowlers?
Yeah,
they do a great job. If you guys want to know about doing education programs in the schools, you need to get it. They got it figured out. They've got it. Their own nonprofit that does it. Yeah, and they use that nonprofit to raise money to put them into the schools. So if you haven't had a chance to talk to them, talk to them. Dylan, this is going to be the last, and then I want to have closing remarks.
Oh,
good. Dylan,
you added me. Amazing. Well, I mean, I'm going to do, as far as what I'm going to do, I want to do more like in-school assembly things that I can do for my own to take artists into schools. But I did want to say a thought also, which is there's grant money. I used to do this at Jefferson Center where I would bring an artist in residence for a week, and there's a lot of money in that. And what you can do is get money to come in and do a bunch of outreach. So this is if you're on tour, you know, and you got 5 days in Roanoke, Virginia, and you're getting $5,000 for 5 days. Well, you're working in schools for a portion of that day. The rest of the day, we got super creative with our artists in residence. We recorded music. We did outreach to other communities. They got a lot of downtime. It was a kind of beautiful thing to take a nice chunk of funding and use it in that way. So, I mean, it's a way to take tour situation and take a big chunk and make some money in the middle and then keep going on tour. So
Special Consensus also has a program, traditional American music, that they do in the schools. Who does? Special Consensus.
Well, listen, you've got a quick one?
Yeah, this was a brief one. I mentioned the idea of some group of people from this thing carrying on this discussion afterwards. I'd like to ask if anyone would be interested to do that.
So okay.
That's an excellent idea. See Christopher for the details.
I'm going to send, I took notes on what everybody said, and my intent is to send those notes not only to everybody in this room, but to have it be promoted through the foundation or IBMA somewhere, where it can be of more access to people outside of here.
That's great.
This would be a great topic for IBMA.
Okay, hold that thought for tomorrow, because you're going to get a
I
chance
will.
to
I've already written it in my book.
I would
Okay.
think they would do like a training, I think they could do a training for, for how to be in the school, how to teach it.
Okay, so let me sum up this little discussion, and then we're going to take a break. And my summary is, I thought the ideas about what's wrong and your diagnosis, since you were 24 consultants, which was great, with a lot of collective knowledge. I love that part, but I don't love that part nearly as much as that last 5 or 10 minutes, when each of you were taking accountability to go off and do something. Because there's a lot of power in this room. Maybe you realize it, maybe you don't. But you all have the power to change the course of bluegrass music. I mean, we heard Kyle Cantor getting fired. We hear the audience is aging out, the music is becoming stale. You guys are the ones that are changing, not me. But you guys are about to change it. So I love the action orientation of that, and I want to encourage a lot more of that. A lot more of that, especially tomorrow's discussion. Let's come back to this whole topic of the choosing the topic for the master class, for example. Tomorrow we'll have a discussion. So we'll revisit this. Okay, it's break time. We have a great discussion coming in at